I thought for the UCLA game that you did a lot of really good things defensively. And I have personally seen a lot of people poo-pooing on this LSU defense over what they've done the last 2 weeks. Now, do I think that they got to get better at not allowing the explosive plays? Yes. Did that against UCLA? UCLA is not a good football team. South Carolina continues to win. They got a big one in 2 weeks. They have Ole Miss coming into town. I mean, what do they do there? Can they out physical? Does Lenore Sellers come back? Robbie Ashford went off this past weekend against Akron, which everybody keeps telling me, oh, well, Blake, that's Akron. Well, that's interesting because you can't blow out Nichols. I think that there is a lot to be said about the sacks and the havoc and just outright pressure that this defense has put on teams. You gave up 14 rushing yards this past game against UCLA. Guys, you're 47th in the country in rushing defense, which, by the way, you're one of the only teams in the country that's faced multiple Power 5 opponents or Power 4 opponents. Actually, you're one of, if not the only team, I think there's one other, that has faced 3 P4 opponents in the first 3 weeks. Not everybody has done that. I mean, sure as hell, Ole Miss hasn't done that. Alabama hasn't done that. There are a lot of teams that have not done that through the first 4 weeks of the season. You have gotten better at stopping the run and defending the run. But I think what has happened here, and I told you this in the post game, and I'll tell you here this again, is we see that we're tied against UCLA in the first half, and we panic, and we should. However, there are 4 quarters of football, and you shut them out in the second half, and you just, for whatever reason, can't start off doing anything good sometimes. I think that there's a massive thing that we're missing when we're talking about this defense, because it's not missed on me that they've gotten multiple turnovers on your side of the field that you have not converted on. Guys, 6 points on 3 turnovers and on your side of the field is losing football. Why Brian Kelly is not being asked about that is beyond me. I think it's the number one question that he needs to be asked in a press conference. Coach, how much emphasis during the week are you putting on this offense, who you're saying is playing very well, which I don't disagree with you or him, but how much emphasis is going into that when this defense, who, by the way, was 115th in the country last year, 115th in the country last season, who has climbed up relatively 100 spots, 100 spots from a statistical analysis through 4 weeks. What is the game plan to remedy when this defense is getting you turnovers that you go down the field and score? If I would have told any of you in the beginning of the season that LSU would have jumped almost right at, but almost 100 points statistically in total defense, what would any of you have done? I know what most of you would have done. You would have come into this show. You were going into any of your favorite LSU content shows and been like, Blake Baker, the GOAT. The thing is, though, when you're creating the turnovers, guys, you're leaving way too many points on the board. When you should have blown out South Carolina, if we're being honest. When you should have blown out Nichols. When you should have blown out UCLA. You're playing to the level of your opponent. I'm not going to talk about South Alabama this week because I feel like that when I talked about them, the level of intensity decreased. And I think that the level of intensity has decreased on this team or increased based off the level of play of their opponent. That cannot happen. You got to go out there and beat somebody's rear end when you are more talented than them. You have a better staff than them. You have a more experienced staff than them. You have better facilities and training. There's no reason that the 126th offense in the country and the 128th total defense in the country has any business keeping you out of the end zone or getting 3 and outs. None. 0. But I will say this until I'm blue in the face. Through the first quarter of this season, or really, actually, we're a little bit past the first quarter. The second quarter of this season, guys, we're in the second quarter of the season already. And through that, you have not been good when your defense has gotten you stops and turnovers at converting on those situations. It is your biggest issue. It's not let me back up. I was going to say it's not remotely close. Let me dig into that a little bit more because I don't want to be lazy in my take. Guys, if you cannot convert when you get extra possessions, then the likelihood of you being where you want to be at the end of the year is not, you're not going to get there. Now, I have been challenged a lot on this situation. In the challenge of that, I would throw out, what is your expectations of where they need to be? See, you're watching the game and say, offensively and statistically, we're dominating. Where I don't necessarily disagree in the passing game, where I do agree is you're not – guys, you got 34 points because you had to go you had to have 2 drives over 90 yards to get into the end zone. That's not going to work. You've had multiple – 3 to be exact in the last 2 weeks, where the defense has produced a turnover on your own side of the field and you've gotten 6 points. That is abysmal. Abysmal. You're leaving at minimum 15 points on the board. If you beat South Carolina 45-27, that's much different. If you beat UCLA 52-17, that's much different. And I'm not expecting you to score on every drive, but what I am expecting is that the 2 things that you have to do is not take 2 90-yard drives to the end zone. I have no idea what Brian Kelly told his team at halftime, but it worked. And you cannot, nor should you. And there's going to be LSU fans who don't really want to pay attention at the current moment that won't give South Alabama their due. You better not play around this week. You better not play around this week. You will lose. You will find yourself shocked and awed about, why did we lose? Why did we beat South Alabama by 7 points? Why did we beat them by 10 points? You'll go through an entire bye week saying, oh, there's no way in human hell that we can beat Ole Miss. I think that you are on the cusp of not just being a really good team, being I think you're a good to average team right now. I think that this team, for what it's worth, is on the cusp of being really, really good. Maybe even, I say great, but I think if a team's in the, a top 4, they have that potential. But if you're not going to get points when there are turnovers and stops, guys, I don't know what to tell you. Now, I respect Bill Connolly. If you don't know who Bill Connolly is from ESPN, he does his S&P Plus. It's a statistical analysis. He's got LSU as the number 5 offense in the country. You are not the number 5 offense in the country. You're not remotely close, because if you were a top 5 offense, which would be elite, great. Like, think about this. The number 5 offense in the country last year was Oregon. You're not there. You're not there. And I do think that Garrett is doing some really good things in between the 20s. But if you cannot get points, anything that goes on in between the 20s doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you can't score. If you are able to convert on some of these situations, guys, not only will you change momentum, not only will you change the tempo of the game and how things are perceived, guys, against some of these opponents, you might blow them out and you might be able to show yourself that you're better than them. No, 2 years ago, you weren't a better overall team than Alabama, in my opinion. I don't think from a depth perspective, I don't think in 2022 from a talent or coaching perspective that you were better than Alabama. But what did you do? Every single time that you made stops, Jane Daniels made you pay for it. If you don't want to take my word for that, take Nick Saban's word for that when he talked about that in his postgame that night. Now, regardless if it's Jane Daniels, and I'm going to get away from that argument because a lot of you think that I have some sort of biases. Look at any other quarterback in the history of life or existence and tell me that that's not the case. Great teams separate themselves when you have turnovers. That's how it's done. Like I look at Tennessee. Tennessee had 2 turnovers. We're going to get the ball right back. And you know what they did? Even though they didn't score on them, what did they do? They made big stops. They're cohesive with one another. So that would be the 2 biggest things. Looking at this game deeper, guys, LSU rolled 6 safeties out there. And I'm going to be real with you. Brian Kelly confirmed today in his press conference what we already knew. He considered Harold Perkins as more of a Sam linebacker safety type. Okay, thank you for calling him a safety. That would make 7. I know he's not. I'm not going to completely list him as that, but thank you for confirming it. Guys, they rotated more safeties than a Kardashian changing underwear during the filming session. It quite honestly, they are throwing poo-poo at the wall to see what sticks. They're throwing poo-poo at the wall and seeing what sticks. Right now, nothing is sticking. It's probably a bad analogy to throw, pun intended, at the wall, but it's the truth. Your safety play right now is abysmal. You're getting lost in man-to-man coverage. And I say it's man-to-man coverage because Brian Kelly today on the touchdown to the tight end to open the game for UCLA confirmed that Major Burns should not have come down and should have gone on the tight end. Guys, I don't like calling out players. I'm legitimately, I don't. But you're not good right now at that position. It is your worst position defensively. And because it's such a massive weakness, you're getting hurt by it. Guys, if those explosive plays don't happen, like think about this. What if Sage Ryan breaks down and stops Lenore Sellers on the 50? Like, you're a safety for the reason. Guys, I know it's an open field tackle, but this is LSU. And I hate using that lazy argument. It is LSU. You got to make that tackle. You can't get juked in the middle of the field by a 240-pound quarterback. It's just like, get run over, fine. That still slows him down. But your safety play has been abysmal. And I'm going to tell you, they got to – if it were me and you're going to play the star role position, I would put Major Burns at the star and let him do what he did the first couple of weeks. Putting Major Burns at a strong safety in the middle of the field is the most boneheaded decision that this staff continues to make. It's boneheaded. It quite honestly is boneheaded. Put him at that star position where he had you and gave you the most success. Now, they got to run Jordan Gilbert and Deshaun Spears out there and let it go. Even if you get burned by it, you got to let those 2 go and see what happens. If you don't, you're going to continue to get beat. Guys, Sage Ryan played 1 series from start to finish. He gave up a 20 or 19-yard corner route to a tight end that has no business separating from you. None. Safety play has been abysmal. Second half offensively. I thought you did some great things in the first half. I'm not saying you didn't, but offensively, let's roll through it. I think offensively, the first drive was beautiful. I think Joe Sloan called a beautiful drive. I think that you did some really good things getting Kyron the football. Aaron Anderson was involved. Xavier Thomas was involved. And I agree with Brian Kelly today when he said that Xavier Thomas is a playmaker in that he's not a receiver. He's just a playmaker. Yeah, he is. You did some good things and you did some bad things. Because you can't get away from the running game when things don't go your way. You can't. Sorry, you can't. There's got to be something for 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I bring this up like I did in the post game. There's something to be said about a team like Michigan that lined up and ran the ball that many times on USC and beat the team that you couldn't beat. It's not that Michigan didn't bring just as much pressure as you did. Isn't that their D-line is better than yours? Guys, Woody Marks had 100 yards on 13 carries against Michigan. That's supposed to be the best defensive line in the country. And quite honestly, LSU's defensive line looked better against a common opponent than yours. They didn't. You look better. That's the God's honest truth. But the problem is that Michigan played cohesive football, and that's why they beat the same opponent that you could not. Is because they were ready for the moment and you were not. But I know that people are going to look at statistics. I know people are going to look at the things that they're doing. You got to stay with the running game, and you got to have extensions of the running game. What is one thing you and I have talked about numerous times? A check down to me is an extension of the running game. It always will be. Always will be. And if teams are going to do what they're doing to you, the simple nature it took you that long to get the check downs or to tell Garrett to get to them is abysmal. Now, I think that you're forcing certain plays that don't need to be forced. I don't know if Garrett is being told to throw the ball to Kyron Lacy. I don't know if Joe Sloan wants him to throw the ball to specific people. I don't know if in his headset he is saying, hey, it's man-to-man coverage on the outside, throw the ball to Kyron Lacy. I don't know any of that. What I do know is you got to let Garrett go out there and sling it around to other guys if Kyron is not going to be productive for you. This is the same argument that I gave to Jaden Daniels when Kayshon Boutte was non-factors in most games. Guys, Kayshon Boutte was a non-factor in a game like Alabama. And then we look at Georgia and say, oh, see, he's a playmaker. Yeah, he's always been a playmaker. But he didn't show up in big moments when you needed him. He would take plays off. He doesn't catch a pass against Florida State. Kyron, love you. Think you're a great receiver and will be one. You cannot have times and where you lapse in judgment of what you need to do in reference to focus. You got to be focused and locked in. Guys, Aaron Anderson has been, in my humble opinion, your offensive player outside of the quarterback position. He's been your best player. Neither one of your tackles have been as good as him, relatively speaking. And when you get inside the 20, you're not going to him. Why? Because he's 5'8"? Well, he's the only one that's shown that he can make plays. The one time that you went to him in the red zone, he scored a touchdown. His only touchdown on the season, which also is mind-boggling. And then we have Joe Sloan in the USC game screaming at Nussmeier saying, run the play that I effing call. Okay, well, that sounds great. Well, some of the things that you're calling and forcing your quarterback to do is not benefiting him because he's missing wide open receivers that I think Nussmeier, quite honestly, would hit if he's not being talked to in his headset. Give him the play, tell him what coverage it is, and let him go. The red zone issues are a massive problem. You got a really good drive in the first drive and in multiple drives in the second half. When you got in the red zone, I thought that you did well. When you needed, in my humble opinion, when you really, really needed in the first half to get a score in the red zone, you looked horrible. You know, I keep hearing that Garrett is in his fifth start, and he is. This defense is on their fourth game with Blake Baker, and they were in the 115s last year. I know it's not necessarily comparable. What I'm trying to point out here is this. You have had hardly no turnover on your offense. None. Zero. You have a coordinator change, yes, but BK is an offensive mind. Guys, the play calling has the same personnel lingo to it. So there's that. I love in the second half, what Garrett did and doing the simple things. Let me say this. If Garrett Nussmeier plays games like he did in the second half, you're going to be very tough to be beat. Very tough. It's going to be very difficult for teams to beat you. Let me repeat it. If Garrett continues to play the way that he did in the second half versus UCLA and taking what the defense is giving you, guys, they're a 42-point-a-game team. Situational awareness, not the strongest suit of this offense, but I think that Garrett, for what it's worth, the second half, getting his playmakers the ball in space was the best half that he had all season. All right. A couple more things here. I've heard a lot of people talking about the running game. Guys, in the running game in the second half, I mean, we can run back through it if we absolutely need to on both of those 90-yard drives. But I look at both of those 90-yard drives and say this. You started off the second drive that went for 90 yards. You got 2 checks downs to Caleb Jackson. You got 2 carries from him for 7 yards. You got a check down that went for 2 yards. You went for 3rd and 2. Caleb Jackson got another run. You went for 5 yards. Nuss had a throwaway on a hitch route to Daniels, who was wide open. He missed Daniels again on a 3 route or an out route. And then you had 3rd and 8, and Taylor got you an unreal play on a zone read that he hurdled a guy. And then you had a check down, which is an extension of the running game from Garrett, and you score from 35 out from Caden Durham. What do I make of that? Guys, if you run the football at 4 yards a carry, you're going to win every game that you want to. Let me say this, because people don't Jamal Christian, I don't know what's going on in the chat. Let it go. Guys, don't respond to him. Let him go. Don't respond to him. If there's a troll in the chat, just don't respond. We'll take care of it. I think in the second half, let me say this. 2 teams yesterday or Saturday won games by running the football 4 yards in a cloud of dust. Utah and Michigan, both. Won games without elite quarterback play. What do? Guys, I'm telling you, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, you're going to win football games. So that's what you're currently doing. All right, a couple more things, Sam. I need Caden Durham to touch the football more. I don't know what's up with the personnel. I don't guys, I'm telling you, when the kid's got the ball in his hands, he's a playmaker. I know that you said, well, man, there were some of the runs he had weren't really good. Well, okay. But you can't just, he's got 3 touches in the first half, so let's not get him the football. That's stupid. That's so dumb. So dumb. Throw him some of these check downs. Get him the ball in space. Let him do some things, man. That's something else. I talked about this, but forcing Kyron Lacy in the football, it's got to stop. You got to go to who's open. I think Garrett Nussmeier would have blown this team out, and this offense, we would have blown this team out as just a team if we're not forcing some things to Kyron. We're trying to get him touchdowns in the red zone. Got C.J. Daniels beat his man on the slant route that Kyron Lacy missed. Somebody's got to have a conversation with Kyron and saying, hey, man, we got to go to other people to get you more open. Stop barking. I know that it's happening. And Kyron's a really good player, but you got to do that. Bradyn Swinson, let's end it with this before we get to a couple of comments and wrap some things up on this segment. And we'll go to Brian Kelly, and then I'll get some of your questions, and then I got to roll. Bradyn Bradyn Swinson is a first quarter, I don't know, let's just say for the first 4 games, let's just call it the first quarter of the season. I know it's not, but let's just pretend it is. I think he's the best player on your football team at the current moment. And if he's not the best player, then he's right behind Nussmeier on the production that they've had.